Isopropyl alcohol, 99.9% is what I use. I know a bunch of other people use denatured alcohol, resin wash detergent. It's all essentially performing the exact same function. We wash our resin parts in a solution like this to perform two main functions. We're going to talk about it in this video. I hope that at the end of this video, we can also put to bed a lot of myths around refreshing your IPA after you've washed a bunch of resin prints in that solution. There are things that work and there are a lot of things that don't work. That's what we're going to be talking about in today's video. My name's the Legend Tuba Guy, and this is Tuba Makes. I run a resin print farm selling those Gooner models that Reddit pretends they don't order. I see you. If you resin print, you know that there are two expensive consumables. One is the resin that you're using, but that goes into the finished product that hopefully ends up in your customer's hands. The other is the wash solution that you choose to use, whether it's IPA, mean green, resin wash detergent, whatever it is. And that is just a wasted product that gets used up in the process. If you're anything like me, and my analytics say that you are, you've probably searched on YouTube for ways to make your IPA last as long as possible. This video is going to be pretty focused on IPA. And you've probably come across dozens of videos of people talking about how to refresh your IPA, things you can do to filter your IPA and bring it back to life so that you can continue to use it. Well, I am not a material scientist, and there seems to be exactly one video on all of YouTube that I've been able to find that an actual material scientist talks about this. This video by Ember Prototypes brings on Andrew Mayhall from 3D Gloop, who is a material scientist. And he talks about what is happening when we wash our resin prints, the actual chemical things, the molecular things that are happening. And again, I'm not a material scientist, so I'm going to try and distill this information down to you. That video is about an hour and 20 minutes long. I highly recommend you go watch it if you resin print at all. It is chock full of incredible information. But if you don't want to watch an hour and 20 minute long video, I'm going to try and distill it at a very high level for you and tell you what works and what doesn't work when it comes to making our IPA last as long as possible. I'm also going to tell you what I do and what my process is. When you wash your resin prints in a wash solution like IPA, there are two things happening. The first is chemical solving. So we use IPA because it breaks down the resin that we're using. So we want it to eat away at all the uncured resin bits that are stuck to the sides of our prints because resin is sticky. It wants to stick to itself. And we need it to grab on. And then also our second part is the mechanical agitation. Just like a clothes washer, we don't just dunk our clothes in a tub of water and detergent. We actually rotate them. We tumble them around or spin them around or whatever to mechanically agitate them. It's why you'll see in a Mercury V3 Plus that I use from Elegoo, any wash station really, they'll pull the solution down through the parts or push it up through the parts. Or if you're a YouTuber that has a Hey Gear sponsorship, yours bumbles it around, and that's pretty cool too. The thing is, not everything in the resin is solvable by the solution that you're using. So this doesn't apply for like water washable resins. Water washable resins would be solvable by water, but if you're not using a water washable resin, which I do not, you want to use something like IPA, and it should solve a lot of the things that are in that resin, but not everything. Things like pigments, other fillers that might give the resin particular qualities that we're looking for. Printability, elasticity, viscosity, ABS-like quality, strength, toughness, all that good stuff that we want in our resins for particular use cases. Those things might not actually be dissolvable by IPA. So the important part of this section of the video, some molecules will dissolve completely into your solution and some will not. The ones that do become part of that liquid soup now that you have in your wash station. And the rest of them are also now a part of that soup. And when you've mixed it entirely, they're floating around just like everything else. And it may make you think that it's a nice mixture all around, but the stuff that isn't dissolvable by your solvent, the IPA in my case, is it loosely attached to the rest of the things in this chemical soup, whereas the dissolvable bits are strongly attached or are just floating around all on their own. They've broken down into their individual components, and they are just now free floating in this chemical soup. Bonus fun fact for you, we think of our resin parts as solid prints, like this thick Java, goddamn. We think of all of the walls of thick Java as solid, but they're actually not at a molecular level. Your solvent, IPA in my case, can get inside your parts, causing them to swell. If you do very long washes or repeated washes, or just let them soak in your solvent solution, you can actually get your IPA to go into your parts at a molecular level, causing them to swell. When that happens, your solvent may actually pull out, probably will pull out, plasticizers or other fillers or other components that make up the resin back out of your parts. So when you then take your part out of the solution, it might actually, as the IPA evaporates off or drains off, it might actually constrict back down to a smaller size than when it began. On top of that, it can actually change your part's literal mechanical properties. Because like I was saying, a lot of those fillers, a lot of those plasticizers are giving us different variations between the different types of resin. When we say ABS-like versus a 14K fast-flowing, high-detail resin, a lot of those plasticizers and a lot of those fillers that they've added to the resin are giving them those individual properties. And so if you pull those out of the part, you're literally changing the mechanical properties of the part you've already printed. I think this is where all of the confusion here on YouTube and other sites like Reddit or forums begins. Because people see this solution full of these dissolved components and the non-dissolved but now in chemical soup components, and they think, well, I should be able to get all of those things out. And they might be trying some different methods to do that. So let's go over those. The first one I want to talk about is decanting. I think this is the easiest one. If you let your wash solution sit for a period of time, you will see things settle out of solution. The easiest one to see is pigment. I use Sunlu ABS like dark gray. You will see a dark gray sludge at the bottom of a bucket if you let it sit long enough. I'm sure there's a bunch of other things that are also settling out, but you know what's not settling out? Those solved components, those things that have broken down into their individual elements that were solvable by the IPA, dissolvable by the IPA. Those things are still in the solution, still mixed around, still floating just as ever. They're never coming out. They're never settling out. They are now mixed into the solution. They are spread throughout the mixture, okay? The stuff that has settled is not. So you might see a large layer of clear looking liquid and think, my nice fresh IPA, but it's not. All of those dissolved components are still in there. The next one I've seen is filtering. So any consumer grade filter you're seeing, a lot of the ones I've seen are 1 micron or half micron, and we'll talk about my setup later, and you'll say, well, didn't you just say that this was pointless? No, there's a lot of caveats and nuance to this, but let's talk about it from a people claiming that it's refreshing your IPA perspective first. People will say that, I'm running it through a filter setup down to a half micron. Well, that's only good to filter out particles that are larger than half micron. What we're talking about is so incredibly small that Ember Prototypes video that you should go watch, that Andrew Mayhall claims, the material scientist claims that these things are smaller than an electron scanning microscope can see. That's how small we're talking about. A consumer grade water filter is never going to filter those things out. There are some like molecular sieve things that might work. It just seems like a lot of work, which is another point we're going to get to. But filtering is not going to help you get those things out of the solution. So whenever you see somebody talking about filtering and they're saying, I run it through my filter setup and then it's fresh new IPA. No, it's not. Now, filtering is usually connected to my next method I want to talk about, and that's UV lights and or the sun. But we'll talk about UV lights first. Usually if you see a filtering setup, there's some sort of coil of like silicone tubing with UV lights around it. This does not work. I just want to be very clear. This does not work. It might work like a super small percentage. You're talking about statistical chance of molecular things bumping into each other while under a UV light and curing to a 0.5 micron scale. It's going to take a very long time for that to happen, if at all. The thing that I want you to try is if you take a bucket of resin-laden IPA and you shine a UV light on it while you're stirring it, what you'll find is that nothing happens. Nothing will cure. As soon as you stop stirring, though, and the mixture slows down, you will see a layer start to form on the surface. You will start to get curing on the surface of that liquid. So running the solution through silicone tubing and shining bright UV lights at it isn't going to do much. The resin needs to be still in order to cure. Now I can hear what you're saying. You're saying, but Tuba, you just said that UV lights will cure it though if I let it sit. And I know that I can take it out into a bucket or a bottle or whatever out into the sun and let the sun cure it. Yes, you're correct. You are correct that it will cure some percentage of it. You don't know that it's 100%. It likely is never going to be 100%. And so, yes, you can take that, you can make the nasty, snotty, globby mess, run it through cheesecloth, and squeeze more IPA out of it. You can do that. It looks horrendous. It looks like a huge mess. I also don't think that those people are going through nearly as much resin or IPA as I am. I have an 11 printer resin farm, so I go through a lot of resin, a lot of IPA, gallons of IPA, multiple 4-kilogram jugs of resin. I can't have small little water bottles of used IPA going out into the sun and then dealing with that. That won't work for the quantities that I'm trying to get to. Even that solution that you get out of that filtered cheesecloth is not going to be pure IPA. It might be clear. Again, we're talking about the dissolved components though. You're never going to see the dissolved components. You might see the pigment fall out, yes. You might be able to do some level of decanting and then curing what comes off the top, but you're never going to get pure IPA back out of that with the methods we've talked about. And now we get to the real method to refresh your IPA, distillation. So you may have seen some videos where somebody uses a consumer grade water distiller, puts their IPA, dirty IPA in it, and out comes clean looking IPA on the other side. This actually does work. This is how industry does it. And if you watch the Ember Prototypes video, if you watch, they've got another video talking about, they have a solvent still actually that takes in gallons of their used IPA and it goes into a bag and you see this like cakey, nasty mixture left in the bag after it's evaporated all of the liquid off that's going to evaporate off, which is the IPA, and put a little asterisk here. And then they capture that and ta-da, you have refreshed IPA. Now, what is that caveat? Couple things. Number one, consumer grade water distillers are incredibly slow. Again, for my level of volume that I'm dealing with, I just can't imagine that I'm going to be able to deal with that in any reasonable time. The other thing is IPA is a huge fire hazard. So you need to be doing that outside. You need to keep a constant eye on it. And I just can't be doing that. The solvent still is a real solution. However, there's still a caveat. The caveat is that if you are evaporating off IPA, IPA is hygroscopic, meaning it's going to pull water in from the atmosphere. When you get IPA like this, 99.9% IPA for max diet, it will tell you anhydrous, no water or additives suitable for technical purposes. So the manufacturer is claiming that there is no water in this. As soon as I open that container, it's going to start pulling in water from the atmosphere. So when you're using a distiller, you're not just pulling over the IPA, you're pulling over IPA and water. So what you're left with is IPA and water. So you're not going to get 99.9% isopropyl alcohol back from a solvent still even. I think that's a really important point to make here, is that none of these methods really ever get us back to the pure, clean IPA that we started with. So what do? This stuff is expensive. We want to make it last as long as possible. What can we possibly do to make that happen? So here's what I do. And again, this is an attempt to keep my costs low, not waste IPA, but also deal with the realities that I have to deal with, that I have a lot of volume. I'm not going to deal with this gelatinous snot mixture out in the sun. I'm not going to do any of that. And I can't own a solvent still where I am at in my garage. Solvent stills start at like $5,000 or something like that. I'm not going to do the water distiller. It's a fire hazard, and I don't have the time to be able to do it. So what I have are 2 wash stations. I have a pre-wash, a dirty wash. I'm going to do this over here. So I have a pre-wash over here and a final clean wash over here. I load that clean wash bucket with about 6 of these bottles of 99.9% IPA. It is fresh, clean, never reused, other than while it's in the bucket. While it's in the bucket, yes, I do multiple washes, but I don't refresh that at all. When that gets dirty, from here to over here, I literally move the bucket from one machine to the other. So now my pre-wash is dirty-ish 99.9% IPA. It's no longer 99.9% IPA. It's dirty IPA, but it still has life to it. It still has mechanical washing ability. It still has some solvent ability, right? Those 2 different things that we're talking about, it still has life to it. When that gets really dirty, when I can really no longer see through it at all, it gets like a super dark gray. Again, I'm using dark gray resins a lot. So when that gets super dark gray and super disgusting, you can also tell that parts start clouding up and making the clean wash really dirty. That is when I will take that bucket from over here, from over here, I will put that into a 5-gallon bucket and I will let that sit for a few days. So what I will see is the pigment settles out, and anything heavy is going to settle out of that solution that wasn't dissolved by the IPA. It's going to settle to the bottom of the bucket. I then have a clear looking liquid, but we now know that there are still dissolved components in there. It's not fresh IPA sitting on top of the pigment. I will take that off using a diaphragm pump, a 1 micron filter, and a 0.5 micron filter in series, just to try and remove anything and everything I can from that liquid, right? If there's anything bigger than a 0.5 micron, I want to filter that out because there's no reason not to do it at that point, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So like, I will suck off that sounds terrible, sorry. I will suck off the top clear liquid into another container, and I will cycle that through my pre-wash setup, my bucket over here, multiple times. The goal is for this to do as much work on my resin prints as possible. When those resin prints come off a printer, they go into this bucket. I want it pulling off as much resin as possible and keeping my clean wash as clean as possible for as long as possible. We also know that it's going to be taking in moisture from the atmosphere, so we have a limited time that IPA is realistically going to work in either bucket, but this is what I've done to try and prolong the life of the IPA. After I've decanted off that top liquid that is on top of the stuff that's settled out, I'll take that sludge at the bottom. It's not really sludge. Sludge is more the gelatinous blob stuff, but it's dark gray, nasty, still liquidy at the bottom. I'll stir it up, make sure I get all of it off the bottom. That will go into another 5-gallon bucket that I take outside and I let sit in the sun for days. So I will let it evaporate off. It will form the nasty gelatinous sludge at the bottom, and I will just put that into a trash bag and away it goes. And we just dispose of it that way. That is my process. It works really well. It makes sure that I'm using the IPA for as long as I think I possibly and reasonably can with the volume that I'm doing through my resin print farm. My process doesn't clean the IPA. I would never claim that I'm cleaning the IPA. I would never claim that I'm filtering the IPA, even though it's going through a filter setup. But this allows me to continue to use that IPA in this dirty pre-wash bucket for much longer than I would be able to otherwise. The big takeaways: filtering removes chunks and improves mechanical washing ability. Decanting allows non-soluble material to potentially fall out of solution and again, increases our mechanical washing ability. UV treatment in any form will remove a portion of the UV curable material, which will improve both mechanical washing ability and also the chemical solving ability of your solvent. But none of these methods restore the IPA to chemical purity. None of these make clean IPA. I have tried a lot of different solutions. I've tried the UV light on silicone tubing. I've tried all of it. None of it works. The decanting does work, but again, we're only improving the mechanical washing ability of that liquid. So we need it to bump up against the sides of our prints when it gets pulled down through the parts in our wash station. That's still pulling material off. That's still a good thing. We want that, but we have lost the chemical solving ability of that liquid. Distilling is the only real way to refresh IPA, and it's only to a particular level. Your goal, in my opinion, should not be to refresh IPA. It should be to increase the mechanical washing ability of your solvent as many times or as long as you possibly can until it is so laden with crap that it just doesn't work anymore. And I will tell you, you will absolutely know. Parts will come out of my dirty wash bucket, parts will come out and it's like, those do not look like it got everything off. And the reason why it's not getting everything off is because it no longer has the mechanical washing ability or the chemical washing ability. Because remember, and I hope I've driven this point home, the mechanical washing ability, those free floating things like pigment, just as an example, those are loosely connected to these other bits. So if those are loosely connected to those other bits, where that thing is connected doesn't exist as a free thing for other things to connect to anymore, right? So you've got all these molecules floating around, bumping into each other, and nothing wants to pick up the molecules that are sitting on the outside of your prints anymore. That's the mechanical washing ability. The chemical washing ability is, I think, much easier to see because you'll see that it's no longer breaking down nearly as much as it should. I really hope that I've done this topic justice. I am just a guy printing dicks and tits on the internet. You watch this video and I'm just a dude saying some stuff into a camera that you're watching on YouTube. Please go watch the actual materials scientists talk about this so you can understand the actual chemical molecular science behind everything that I've tried to distill into this video for you. But if you've liked this video, please hit that like button. If you have any questions, please put them in the comment section down below or join us on the Tuba Makes Discord. I'd be happy to have any discussions around my processes, around the science behind any of this over on the Discord. If you want to see more content like this, hit that subscribe button, and thank you so much for watching.